1 second in line to the presidency, former Speaker of the House Denny Hastert sat quietly in a Chicago courtroom today, making no visible reaction to the news that he'd been sentenced to 15 months in prison on charges of skirting banking rules. Just minutes earlier, Hastert admitted for the first time that he did indeed sexually abuse, he said mistreat, several boys decades ago in his role as wrestling coach at Yorkville High School. Despite the admission, Hastert has received an outpouring of support, much of that from former political figures. Tom DeLay, who served as the Republican majority leader under Hastert in Congress, wrote in part, "We all have our flaws, but Dennis Hastert has very few. He's a good man that loves the Lord. He gets his integrity and values from him. He doesn't deserve what he's going through." Well, joining me in our WGN studios, more on that part of the story, the political component of this, political strategist, radio host, Dan Proft. Nice to see you again, former gubernatorial candidate, right?
Good to see you, Paul. Thank you.
Dan, what is your reaction? You heard me read Tom DeLay's comment there. What's your reaction?
Stunning. I mean, the people who wrote essentially character reference letters for Denny Hastert should be ashamed of themselves. I don't know what it's in Denny Hastert's heart. That's between him and his maker. I know what he did, and what he did is despicable. It's not misconduct. It's not a transgression. It is the most egregious crime short of taking a life that you can commit. It is despicable what has happened. It's despicable that he was only recommended for 0 to 6 months of a prison term by the federal prosecutor. Zach Farden, I think, has some explaining to do. Good for Judge Durkin for doing the rare thing of going above and beyond what federal prosecutors recommending, and at least giving him 1.5 times what was recommended.
Yeah,
but it's not enough. It's not enough.
But here's the thing. The same way like O.J. Simpson, right? Acquitted of murder, and then later on he gets into this thing over in a show, and he gets a 30-year prison, which a lot of people think was payback for that murder charge that he was found not guilty. My question for you is, the sentence today, he was not charged with the sexual abuse. That statute had run.
That's right.
So is it your feeling that this judge should have nevertheless, he could have given him 5 years for what he did, but should he have been influenced by something he wasn't charged with?
Well, it's the underlying crime. It's the underlying crime that gave rise to his criminal action in terms of the structured bank withdrawals. And I think it's relevant. And Judge Durkin thought it was relevant. And I think he was right to include that and include statements from witnesses, including a former protege of Denny Hastert, House Republican leader Tom Cross, served for a decade there, was really sponsored by Denny Hastert politically, his brother, one of the victims. I think it was absolutely relevant in terms of meting out justice and sending a signal to the world writ large that even the third most powerful man in the United States is not above the law. And that's why the sentence should have been at least 15 months. And the other thing, let's remember what we're talking about.
At least 15 months, or should have been more?
I would have gone more. I would have maxed him out. I would have maxed him out if I was Durkin. And let's remember what we're talking about, too. It's not just about sending a message that no one is above the law. It's also he is a sexual predator. Sexual predators are always sexual predators. And I think most people understand that to be true. Most people think they need to be removed from society so they don't prey again, even in his debilitated state. That's what he deserved.
I'm not going to turn you into a psychiatrist with this, but I find it interesting. Maybe you do. Back in, for example, Representative Keith Farnham, right, who, of course, is now serving prison time. He was a sponsor of a child pornography bill until he was, of course, convicted of child pornography charges. And then we have Denny Hastert, who had been very big in child abuse laws and all that. Any sense of what is it behind somebody who sort of leads the charge when they're in the government, and yet these skeletons are in the closet?
Although the flip side is there was a lot of criticism of Denny Hastert back when he was Speaker for slow-walking the investigation into Mark Foley, a congressman who, a Florida congressman, was found to have engaged in illicit, illegal activity with respect to a congressional page. So, I don't know. I don't know, and I think this is part of what's so disquieting about this whole matter, how this could have been kept secret for decades upon decades, and how it influenced the decision-making of a member of Congress and then the man who was third in line for the presidency for the better part of a decade. It's actually a bit frightening.
You also noted, in fact, Denny Hastert, a mentor to Tom Cross, who was the Republican leader, the minority leader in the Illinois House. Tom Cross issued a statement today on behalf of his brother, right, who was the one who testified, who was the victim. Let's share that with our viewers. Tom said, "We are very proud of Scott for having the courage to relive this very painful part of his life in order to ensure that justice is done today. We hope his testimony will provide courage and strength to other victims of other cases of abuse to speak out and advocate for themselves." What should the Illinois look? You've got a daily radio show. People listen to you. You've got a voice. Do you have a message for Springfield?
Well, I think the message is that character counts, and that just going along with the Republican Party policy agenda or the Democrat policy agenda is not enough of a threshold in terms of vetting people to be our elected representatives. And frankly, the Republican Party, one of the reasons it's been beset by corruption and bad actors for so many years, not to mention the Democrats, same boat, is because we say, well, as long as you're going to go along with my program, I don't care what you do in your personal life. And we understand now you couldn't have a more clear case of this, a better illustration of this, that your personal life impacts your public decision making, and the two are inextricably linked, and both should be looked at.
Listen, well, you have just a minute left, but you're all about politics. I want to touch this a little bit because earlier today, and we're going to talk about this later in the show. Ted Cruz, of course, names his vice presidential. Carly Fiorina. Your reaction to that?
I think it was,
why now?
Well, I think it was smart. I think he knew he was going to take a beating last night. He waits for that carnage to subside. Then he introduces Carly as his running mate. So he changes the discussion with just 5 days before the Indiana primary that he has to win.
But he's also mathematically knocked out. He's already mathematically out of it.
He's mathematically out of it, but Trump is not a mathematic guarantee to 1237, and so this is a way for Cruz to get Indiana and prevent Trump from getting to 1237, so you could have a contested convention, which Cruz has a decent chance to win on a second ballot.
So that's the key, right?
That's
second
the key.
ballot
That's
issue.
what it's all about.
All right, Bob.
For Cruz.
I'm sure Trump's going to go after him, just saying, who does he think he is? He should be dropping out of this race. Any chance you think that strategy of Cruz's backfires on him?
No, I think actually Carly is an interesting choice, even in a vacuum, without this pressing need for Cruz to win the Indiana primary. I think she was on the short list for a lot of candidates to be their vice presidential choice with the way she performed as a presidential candidate. So I think the Cruz-Carly ticket would actually be a formidable ticket in the general. Frankly, it has the most intellectual heft, and it is the most tenaciously conservative ticket in my lifetime, were it to be the Republican Party's ticket.
You know, we're both wearing red and blue ties. We're kind of balanced here, right?
Yeah.
I love that.
Bopsy twins.
You got it.
Yeah.
Dan Proft, you can listen to him in the morning with Ana Devlantes, doing some great radio work.
Amy Jacobson.
Amy Jacobson, I'm sorry. Amy Jacobson. Well,
I know. All these news.
They get all messed up.
Yes.
Come back and see me again soon.
Good to see you, Paul.
Thank you. We'll have more on Ted Cruz's pick for vice president.